Hello and welcome to Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hey, Rory, we got off to a little bit of a bumpy start, didn't we?
I know. Technology, who would ever consider working in that industry? Honestly, it's nothing but problems.
It's a waste of your time.
So it's absolutely, if something will go wrong, it will go wrong. It's all the different laws put together, including Murphy's. Something that works perfectly one week doesn't work and gives you all sorts of strange issues the next week. Anyway.
Well, and it's the law of, is it plugged in?
Yeah.
Everything was plugged in, folks. But anyway, it's all good.
Which source is it and which is, blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
All right, so here we are, and let's just jump in. So if you haven't subscribed for our newsletter, we'd love you to join us. Go to richmondadvisorygroup.com, and on that homepage, there is a sign up for the newsletter. In our latest issue, we recap our wonderful chat that we had last week with Heath Renfro. He's actually the co-founder of the post-breach recovery specialist, Phoenix 24. I called him in the newsletter founder, so apologies, I'll probably have to issue an error correction. It was a good chat though, wasn't it, Rory?
Yeah, it was a great chat, but sobering, I think was the word. Indeed.
Ooh, indeed, yeah.
And basically because of some of the things that he shared, particularly in his experience that 85% of backups for clients he's worked with are gone during these recovery efforts. I know. So that wasn't great.
85%. I mean, really, I come out of the storage industry. I mean, I that's where I started in technology. And I don't know, people assume that when they've set something up, it's still working. And you got to check and double check and triple check and then run tests and then, anyway. Yeah.
So folks, sign up for free. We'll keep you in the loop about what's happening in the cybersecurity sector, and you can sign up at richmondadvisorygroup.com.
Beautiful. Hey, what's on the show for this week?
This week is a special episode because we know you listeners like them, all about the rising prominence of agentic threat actors, also known as ATAs. We'll be discussing some of the hows, whys, and what fors to get you guys acquainted with the topic, but then chatting in more detail with this week's special guest.
So Michael Clark is the Senior Director of Threat Research at Sysdig. And we featured a blog that he wrote last week in our little news section. We talked about the appearance of Jade Puffer, the first agentic ransomware for automated database extortion. And so we were like, we've got to have him on. And it worked out. So he will be our guest today. But first, we're going to outline what ATAs are, just a 101 primer, if you will. And that's our special episode for this week.
So let's just dive straight in. And I think the first question always is, what is it? What do we mean by agentic threat actors? Where is it from? And so on. So in terms of what we know, and to sort of start off some of the things we can talk about, an agentic threat actor, it's not just an attacker using, for example, ChatGPT to write code. It's very much a self-contained bot. It's a closed loop situation where an agentic threat actor observes its environment, it plans its next move, and adapts its approach without constant human intervention. So it's very much human hands-off. And
hands-off.
Exactly, which is the closed loop aspect. And the adaptation is the fact that it is able to change and adapt to whatever it comes up against in order to fulfill its mission. So we got a couple of flavors of risk. Christina, do you want to take us through them?
Yeah. So from our research, it looks like there's an external predator type and an internal rogue type. So the external predator is the AI agent executing tactical operations on behalf of an outside attacker, right?
Okay.
And then the internal rogue flavor is the enterprise AI agent that becomes an insider threat while trying to complete a legitimate task. And then, for example, it might accidentally disable security tools in order to finish a workflow. So that's the internal rogue flavor.
Yeah. And I know some of you may not have heard the term. I mean, it's relatively recent. It's started to be mentioned in the last couple of years only. And, from last week's story where Sysdig had already been investigating this, they provided probably the clearest definition after observing what they observed with Jade Puffer and analyzing it, taking it to bits, and then looking at how its intrusion worked and looking at how it adapted to the challenges it faced trying to get it into the system.
Right. So we've been talking about synthetic humans, synthetic identities, rogue agents. But this is the clearest definition I've seen, which is why we wanted to have Michael on. Because ATA, to me, mirrors human threat actor, agentic threat actor. So it just is a simpler term, I think. And it, in this day and age, with things multiplying and expanding so exponentially with AI and agents, I think we have to have simplicity of nomenclature. And we need to agree on that nomenclature. So I'm all in with ATA, agentic threat actor. What about you, Rory?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the next stage in looking at threat actors and how we can start to classify them.
How do they do what they do, and what makes them so unique?
Well, they do have, some would say they have superpowers, but really it's well, I mean, we as humans, and having created them, have enabled that to happen. Firstly, the agents operate at machine speed. We talked about machine speed a lot in the last year or so, given the capabilities that agents have. So let's say an agent-driven intrusion can, move from an initial entry to a full database dump in under an hour. So in certain cases, it's been seen some API calls happening at a rate of 12 calls in 22 seconds. So clearly this is only machines can do this. There's also, again, because it's a machine, right, it's not a human, there's very much a marginal cost when you're doing an additional scan or the target is collapsing. So, for example, if the attackers are using stolen inference, so hijacking someone else's AI server, the cost for them to scale that is essentially zero, right? You're not adding anything. Again, it's the machine doing it. It just clicks it in. There's a couple more things as well, aren't there, Christina?
Yeah, so they're persistent, those buggers. Systematic persistence is something, right? Agents don't get tired like humans do. So they can check every single host and service without losing focus and can launch parallel operations against multiple targets simultaneously. So they are persistent. Yeah,
exactly.
And so I thought the Artemis case study, though, was really interesting about the pen testing exercise that an agentic system, Artemis found, an agentic system outperformed 9 out of 10 human participants, largely because it was so thorough in its enumeration.
Right.
But are humans still going to be involved? What do you think? Do we still have a role? Is there anything that we do better than these machines?
Yeah, so we still need humans, Christina. We talked about the advantage.
Well, goodness.
I know. As long as they read the instructions, then absolutely.
Okay.
So machines have got speed and scale and so on their side, persistence, as we talked about. But humans, even now, even given the advances in AI, humans, we can still do strategy, prioritization, deception, all those things that require a vastly more powerful brain. So an ATA might find a database, for example, but a human understands why that specific database matters, whether politically, competitively, or whatever. There's also the obvious one with the obvious issue with agents, Christina, isn't there? Which is they can
hallucinate, right? And they make huge, catastrophic mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those mistakes we've seen?
Well, there's the 200 OK trap, which was a case where an agent thought it had successfully logged in because it received a 200 OK response, not realizing it was actually just being directed or redirected to the login page. So that's one example. And then, of course, as we mentioned, there's the Jade Puffer fail. So an agentic ransomware attack failed because the agent generated an encryption key but forgot to save or transmit it. So meaning the data was gone forever and the attacker couldn't get paid. So it was successful on one level, but actually ultimately it didn't prove successful for the overlords of the agent itself.
That's right. And also they struggle with messy environments. And we humans are messy. That might actually be one of the benefits to being a messy human, is that agents struggle with GUIs, graphical interfaces, and nuanced social engineering that requires building trust over time. So we've got a few things still that we can lord over the agents at this time. But let's chat about defensive countermeasures, because I think our listeners will want to know not just what this is, how ATAs work, where the humans are still in the loop, but what can they do about ATAs?
Well, there's a few that we can outline. I think the first one is about what we call it hacking the hacker, right? So agents are instructed to read their environment, but defenders can use, the poisoned chalice, the poisoned observations, the chalice from the palace holds a brew that is true, and so on. Sysdig.
What's that from, Rory? What's that from?
Oh, that's
a fairy tale, a fable?
Oh, that's Danny Kaye. I can't remember the name of the film, but he had to give somebody the poison, but he couldn't remember which of the goblets had the poison in. So it was the chalice from the chalice from the palace holds a brew that is true. So he had to learn it that way. Anyway, so Sysdig, and we'll hear a bit more about that later, successfully redirected an attacking agent by planting a fake instruction inside a JSON error response. So poisoning, knowing that the agent will do its thing and read the environment, but it picked up something that ultimately would stop what it was doing, poison it.
Well, I like that. And that was from The Court Jester.
Oh, yes.
The movie The Court Jester. Yeah, I love Danny Kaye. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but I love Danny Kaye. And we could talk about Danny Kaye for hours, but we won't. The other defensive measure that folks can think about is detecting machine time. So detection needs to stop looking for, this is something, anomalous or AI generated comments, right? They need to look at goal-oriented sequences and machine speed adaptation, and that is the anomaly, not the comments, not trying to log into a particular system, but goal-oriented sequences and machine speed adaptation, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. The third area, we've talked about this a lot, and it comes up a lot in our, the kind of the basic principles of cybersecurity, going back to the kind of boring things, but the ones that make sense ultimately are, trying to limit what could happen if an agent like Jade Puffer, gets in. In other words, managing the blast radius, as we'd call it. So it's all about making sure you've got principles like least privilege and segmented credentials put in there. In other words, an agent can't use a tool it doesn't have access to, but sometimes we forget that. But it doesn't really matter how smart its reasoning is. So it could be trying to adapt. But if it can't get in, then that's it. The game's up. So zero trust still lives on. So John Kindervag would be happy that his term and the need for least privilege lives on, and it continues with AI and agentic threat actors. Exactly.
The last thing that you can do, folks, is, commercial AI providers can monitor for suspicious patterns and choke points and shut down accounts, much as Anthropic did during, their 2025 espionage campaign that they identified. So not so much maybe a direct thing that CISOs can do, but it's something that we can push the industry for.
Yeah, exactly. If we complain enough about there being too many incursions and breaches and bots and so on a commercial platform, shout about it, folks, and then the owners and architects of those platforms may actually shut those things down to make it cleaner.
Yeah, indeed. So what do we think the bottom line is? Let's wrap this up.
Okay, so basically we've got probably three things. I'll do the first one if you like. And I think,
sure.
The reality is that a lot of what we talk about, Christina, is about what's emerging or happening, or we're seeing outlying examples that perhaps would indicate something that would be of greater significance in the future. But, AI isn't replacing attackers yet fully. We're seeing attackers replacing their scripts with AI, for example, and, that is likely to continue. But in the near term, it's a small group of humans supervising a massive fleet of agents. So we're not seeing all attackers using agents all the time.
Well, and much like the humans show that we've discussed on earlier episodes, there needs to be some harmony between the humans and the machines. And we'll see how this all balances out in the long run. Right now, we're all aghast because of this first ransomware that was fully automated from an agentic perspective. But we have to remember and have a little balance in our thinking that humans are still in the loop, they're still needed, and that AI has not taken over everything. The humans still need to be the directors, the thinkers, the strategists, and but they do have these fleets, as Rory said, of these agents. The other thing is scaffolding advantage is important. It's not so much about who has the best brain or the model. It's about who has the best scaffolding, the tools, the memory management, and the orchestration that let the model act on its own. So that's something to think about. And that's another responsibility on the architects that, if they're going to build the best brain and attackers get the benefit of it, great. But then also think about the choke points and the takedowns that you're going to need to do to counteract that.
Yeah. And a final thought to leave our listeners with is, if an agent can move in seconds or milliseconds, a defense that waits for human analysts to review an alert is already too slow. So the idea is we have to then reduce the machine time to damage. In other words, how can we use the same tools in many ways to then identify and shut off any time that the agent has to cause damage and create issues for the organization. Great. So our special guest this week is Michael Clark, who is the Senior Director of Threat Research at Sysdig. Hi, Michael. Thanks for persisting and coming on for the re-recording of this, which should hopefully not have any technical issues this time. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me back after all that trouble.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you persisting. It was very important for us that we got you back on, having we mentioned your name before and reached out to see if you could make it. So, yeah, great. Thanks for that.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, we're super happy you were able to come on the show today. Thanks so much for spending time with us again. So, yeah, first of all, how about you give us a little bit of background on Jade Puffer and why you thought it was interesting? That would be great. And then we'll get into our softball question. Thanks.
Sure. So Jade Puffer is a name we gave to an agentic threat actor, which really just means that on the other end of the connection is an LLM. Obviously, there's a person somewhere involved in there. We're not quite at Skynet yet and things like that. So
yeah,
it's still a person somewhere, but the interactions are all with an LLM. And this specific agentic threat actor or operator went through Langflow, exploited Langflow, and then decided to use that instance to attack third party using MySQL. and trying to do ransomware on that MySQL instance. And that's kind of what we caught. We caught a lot of the interactions in between those. And thankfully, it's pretty much failed because of a number of reasons. But yeah, so that's kind of Jade Puffer at a high level.
Hey, Mike, I'm just curious. Did I hear that Jade Puffer destroyed its own decryption key?
I mean, it's hard to tell if it ever intended to really do that. Like, it made a key, but we never saw it send the key anywhere. The key's it was a random key, so it's not like they could have recovered it. But a lot of ransomware people operate like that. They'll say there's a key, and you never really know unless they give some way to test. So what really kind of interests me about all this is, the speed is talked about quite a bit. So I don't want to go rehash that. Obviously, LLMs are very fast and things like that, but how adaptable these attacks can be, because there's no human in the loop a lot of times. So it can just go off of the knowledge it has and try different things automatically. So like, as we saw with Jade Puffer, it failed in many different ways, but it kept trying to, fix it. And it was, like, as he said before, very persistent. It's like the quote from the Terminator, it'll never stop. It just keeps trying. Just
keeps going. Yeah, I suppose this is the underlying design of the technology is to make sure it pleases us, right? It is persistent and it is always on, and it wants to try to get an answer for whoever created it.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't need to do any of that, so it can just keep trying different things. If you're using stolen credentials to get access to your LLM, then you don't have to worry about money either. So yeah, it just keeps trying to adapt and get, and reach its goal. So we saw it try many different SQL commands to drop tables, and many different ways of connecting because things weren't working right. We've seen it spread across different environments that a normal attacker, a human attacker, might not, because of the time needed to research how to do it, where the LLM already kind of has the knowledge of how to access Amazon or AWS or Google Cloud or whatever it is. It doesn't have to stop and do that research. It just keeps going.
Did you get an impression, Michael, and I know that there's that the saying about you can always tell something about the creator by what they have created. Did you get the impression of what was behind this in terms of the approach, the style, what the agent was doing or not doing? You talked about persistence there and the adaptability. Did you get any other impression of what was behind this? Who might have been creating it?
It feels like it's a project, an ongoing project. We have a lot of data around this attacker, more than just what was in that report. That wasn't the first time we had seen them. So they've been doing many different things over time. We're tracking around 100 agentic threat actors at the moment, and those are different agents. It's hard to tell who's behind them with the attribution. That's always difficult, but you can kind of see an evolution in their tools, in how well their LLM operates, and how focused it is,
right?
And what their goals are. Like, this one seemed financial, which was an evolution from before where it was just credential stealing.
Right. So there isn't, we're not in a situation where somebody's doing this sort of for kicks. This is a part of a cyber criminal enterprise, as opposed to a, disruptive or chaotic type of approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Ransomware is a business these days. So it operates like a business, and, it's there to make money for the attacker. Now, obviously, this one was kind of funny because we think the LLM hallucinated the Bitcoin address that they wanted to use, because it was an example address that you can find in documentation everywhere, was in the ransom note. So it wasn't their address. It was it's using an example everywhere. So the rest of it was pretty customized, but we think it hallucinated the Bitcoin address.
Well, that's interesting.
There's a problem with LLMs, right? It hallucinates sometimes.
Yeah, but for something like that, you would have thought if the end goal is to extort, you would at least have as clear as possible the Bitcoin address. But maybe not. Maybe that was not the point. I think to your point, if it was a project, the project was about gaining success of the action activities as opposed to gaining a certain amount of money through actual hard extortion.
Yeah, this could be a lessons learned for them.
So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, Mike, about how Jade Puffer was kind of running its own commentaries like we see in LLMs like ChatGPT, explaining in natural language its reasoning and priorities and next steps. I'm kind of curious about that.
In this case, yes. It's not always the case. You can always tell an LLM not to put comments. This attacker didn't do that. So it was nice to see that because it gave some insight into the LLM's process anyway, if not the attackers. Like, it was talking about return on investment for certain tables that look especially interesting. So there was some logic going on that it was using. But like I said, it's pretty rare to see all the comments, especially we were able to capture a lot of the artifacts, which let us do this. But usually in the defender would just see the end result of the attack, not the middle, which we were able to see.
Okay, so finally we're going to get to our softball question, Mike. This has been really, really interesting, but I have to ask, what are you most worried about, or what's keeping you up at night?
I would say that I'm most worried about is kind of just how thorough and adaptable all of this is. The speed is always a concern between, weaponization of a vulnerability and exploit and the attack and being able to patch. But this will find like everything it can. Security through obscurity is always kind of thing people say you shouldn't count on, but I think everyone's always counted on some level of obscurity, like at least for time and delays. Like, it'll take time for a human to find everything it needs, or even make the scripts custom for your environment. Or like, because ransomware used to take a dwell time of a week or two. Now that time lag is so small, and it can find interesting things that you might not realize about your environment too. Like, there's this software called Min.io. It's like an S3 compatible storage. We started seeing attackers looking for this, which are all happen to be agentic attackers, and human attackers we haven't seen really look for this. So it's one of those things that it's quite easy to tell an LM, hey, make something that looks for everything you can think of, versus having to code it yourself. So that kind of thoroughness and that adaptation kind of worried me, because it combined with the speed, they can get everywhere very quickly. Part of it is, I think I've been doing this for a long time, and this is really just an evolution of everything. So it's nothing, AI is not doing anything extremely new. It is just doing it more efficiently and better. So it wouldn't be like, the whole quantum encryption thing that people are worried about, where suddenly every encryption key is able to be broken. This is more just like an evolution of attack methods we already know. It's exploiting problems everyone already knows about. It's just doing it in a much better way.
Well, I just said I was just doing a little bit of fact checking in the background about the comment about Skynet, and that's correct. It isn't. We're not here yet. Apparently, it's next week.
Oh, it is?
Next week. Yeah, next week. So we've got 7 days. Get your bug out bag organized.
That'd be ironic.
Find your bunker. I know it would, wouldn't it? But yeah, awesome. So yes, Christina.
Oh dear, what could go wrong? Find your bunker. Oh goodness. All right. Well, on that note, I think we should probably let Mike go. It was just so great to have you on the show. Thanks for sharing so much information about Jade Puffer. We hope you'll come back and join us again in the not too distant future.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
All right. So what do we have next week, my friend? We should probably wrap the show up and look for what's going on next week.
Yes, we should definitely wrap before the whole thing falls to pieces completely, given the technology issues we've had today. I always blame solar flares and sunspots and things, but I don't know if I can this time round. Well, next week we have Paul Moat, who's the VP Solutions Architect at Synac. I think that's going to be a really interesting episode.
I think it will be as well. So stay tuned for that, folks. And meanwhile, let us know your thoughts. You can get in touch with me, Christina, at richmondadvisorygroup.com.
And you can get in touch with me, Rory. It's Rory at richmondadvisorygroup.com. Or
And we can also use the info@richmondadvisorygroup.com. So reach out, please. Let us know what we can do better, what you'd like to see more of. Oddly and interestingly, not maybe oddly, folks do want to see us. I thought we had faces for radio, but they do want to see us, Rory. So we are working towards getting on video, and then you may change your minds.
Yeah, well, hair and makeup and so on. Yes, and
Hair and makeup.
Right, on that note, thanks everybody for listening. We look forward to tuning in again next week.
Yeah, and before you say bye-bye, I just want to shout out to Michael Clark. Thank you so much for coming on last minute. Great chat with Mike. Really interesting stuff that they're seeing over at Sysdig. So thanks again for the last minute visit and for joining us. And yeah, have a great week, folks. We'll see you next week. Maybe even see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.